What's the aim of multiculturalism?
That we all live together in a harmonious society,
Is it a journey? Is it a journey or a destination? When are we multicultural enough? When? When's the end?
Oh God. What the fuck is this? I need to find help.
When's the end?
It doesn't end.
It doesn't end. It doesn't end. It doesn't end.
It doesn't end.
Until what?
For
When
you, history ends.
There's no more white people left?
Oh, there you go. Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. I'm your host, Hector, and I'm here with my co-host, Gilbert.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Oh, come on. Yeah, I told you. I keep getting suggested all these Breaking Bad clips, even though I don't even watch them. Well, anyways, I'm here with my co-host, Gilbert, and I'm here with a very special guest, Blair Cottrell. How you doing, man? Great to have you on.
Doing as good as I could be doing, I suppose. Thanks for having me on, guys. It's exciting to talk to some guys from New Zealand. I don't think I've been on with any guys from New Zealand for a while, so I'm excited to find out what's going on over there. And yeah, thanks for finding the time to accommodate me.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, we're happy to have you on. As you guys, I'm sure you don't really need an introduction, but we'll give one anyway. Blair's basically he's been an activist for white Australians for about, I don't know, a decade probably. It's still going. He runs the Joel and Blair show with his co-host Joel Davis, and he does that weekly, and he's always giving a commentary, and he's still doing activism now. He's showing up to events and marches and weightlifting competitions. So he's still involved in the scene, and he's a veteran of the scene and been in a leadership position for pretty much a decade. Is that correct? Anything I missed, Blair?
Yeah. I'm just the guy. I'm just the guy with a phone who likes to, tell the truth. And that video you guys played at the start, God, that feels like a lifetime ago. That was probably in 2016, I think. So how many years ago is that now, guys? That's like maybe close to 7 or 8 years ago. And this was in a different time where I suppose what I was doing was rewording and rephrasing the truth so average people could understand it. And that's why I became so known and controversial back then. But you go on platforms like X, formerly Twitter now, and the sort of stuff people are allowed to post, I feel like I don't even need to be there anymore. Like the kind of stuff that you're allowed to say stuff that is so much more explicit than what you were allowed to say back when I was allowed on Twitter. Like my role back then was to take some of these more anti-Semitic, nationalistic talking points and put them through a filter, use different wording and phraseology so average people were able to understand and clue on to what was happening. But there's no longer a place for that, really. So I suppose I've only just made a new account on X, which seems to X doesn't mind me being on the platform now. I made that a couple of months ago, and it only just recently got verified. It took a while to get verified. So yeah, there's been a huge change in culture, specifically on what was formerly Twitter. The sort of stuff you can post now is unbelievable. Like you would have been censored in 2 seconds, like 6, 7, or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
For posting the stuff people are posting on there now.
Well, Twitter went from being like this extreme, the most censored social media platform to the least like censored out of, the big ones, not including, alt media like Rumble or Gab or whatever. It went from the most to the least, which is sort of funny. Obviously, people are still experiencing censorship. A lot of your compatriots in Australia are still on there. I mean, are still not on there, have been banned for basically no reason, as a lot of people have. A lot of people in the UK, same thing there. So there is still censorship, but it's a lot lighter. And that's probably by design because people were losing faith in these social media companies, and they probably thought, okay, it's better to loosen our grip a little bit. Otherwise, these people just go to places like Gab and Rumble, and they're not going to come back, or Telegram. So I think because there's an actual competitor there, they had to deregulate a little bit, but there is still censorship, obviously. So
and what's more is there's still intelligence gathering operations and
true.
Data surveillance, massive data, acquisition of everybody, no matter what platform, basically, even Rumble and everything.
Well,
Yeah.
how does the censorship feel from the perspective of a New Zealander? And what's the culture like over there compared with Australia? I suppose we can get to the bottom of that.
Yeah.
Like, do you guys have much political activity happening there? What would you say the main activist group, the nationalist group in New Zealand is? And is it safe to be a part of that activism? Or do you experience pretty heavy government intervention? What's it like over there?
So in the past, there was Action Zealandia here in the past, right? They've sort of gone, I guess you'd say they're not really public anymore. They're still around, but they're not quite as public. At the moment, there's active clubs trying to start up. Like there's this Southern Rangers Active Club, which is an active club in Nelson, and I believe there's some other ones in the works that I assume are going to go public soon. So it's sort of like active clubs at the moment, but there was organisations in the past like Action Zealandia, Dominion Movement, National Front, but they've all sort of gone quiet in the meantime. So, but there's always, because of the mind shift has changed. Society has changed quite a lot. Because 5 years ago, like these pro-white talking points, like just saying stuff like something's anti-white, like that wasn't part of the mainstream like narrative 5 years ago. And now you've got like run-of-the-mill conservatives saying stuff like that. You got like Donald Trump, Winston Peters, who's like the leader of New Zealand First here, saying stuff like that. So sort of our talking points are becoming public. So I guess you don't like, at least in New Zealand, they're getting more public. So you don't quite need the same high level, I guess
Yeah.
you'd say, organization anymore. It's just going towards more of like an active club level, which is more about like self improvement and community building, which is good. I don't mind it.
There's
Right. Well,
also.
there
Oh, go
is
ahead.
in Australia right now a Senate inquiry happening, and I don't believe it's the first time this has happened. It seems to keep happening. It's a Senate inquiry into far right extremism, and one of the main subject matters that's been raised during the inquiry are active clubs. And it's been put forward by, I can't remember the name of the committee, but it's some sort of uh, international think tank. Perhaps it's called the Counter Extremism Project. I think that's what it is actually. And they've suggested, not even suggested, they've asserted that active clubs are just a front organization for shadow militias that are planning violence behind the scenes. They don't have any actual examples of
Yeah,
this.
they just made it up. The example is it's real in my mind. It's
Right,
ridiculous.
right. But I suppose the question I'm going to branch off with is, what about government intervention? Because over here in Australia, we have a wing, at least in Victoria, a branch of Victoria Police called CTC, which I believe stands for Counter Terrorism Command. And they've been known to door knock people, visit people's families, and just engage in that standard sort of pressure harassment level activity that makes people think twice about joining an active club or maybe participating in political protests. Does that happen over there for you guys? Have you guys experienced any of that?
Yes.
What's it like in New Zealand?
Yeah, we've had that happen before when organizations like Action Zealandia were around and still public. If someone was doxxed, they nearly always had a cop show up to their house, and like it's like you said, it's intimidation. Sometimes they would even show up to their place of work. So there is that. Luckily, there wasn't the same, like I guess you'd say, the same legal, like actual like charges being brought against people and like literal just physical harassment of the like police harassing activists like we've seen in Australia in the last few months. So there was like I guess you'd say the more it's I don't know what you call it. It happens to the anti-lockdown protesters as well. Like if someone was, in a leading role at these anti-lockdown protests, you'd have cops show up to their house and place of work. It's just intimidation. It didn't really go much further than, police intimidation or stuff like that, and maybe like some Antifa guy having a cry on Twitter, and that's sort of as far as it went. So it's
Right.
not the same level, luckily.
Right. We definitely do have some legal intervention, especially down here in Victoria.
Yeah, I've got all that
And
right here. I mean, look at this. I mean, you've got Thomas Swall, another activist in Australia, leader of the European Australia movement, and he's literally having armed police escort him onto his flight. Like it's ridiculous.
yeah, he told me about that actually, and it's good that someone actually got footage of that. I haven't seen that footage yet, but we could even play
Yeah,
that. Let's
play it now.
play that and react to it.
Yeah, it's just cops standing there.
Okay, so this was Thomas Sewell boarding an airplane just to fly from one state to another. And this was the sort of entourage that he experienced.
Why do all these cops sound like homosexuals? Like all these cops that harass people, they all sound like really gay.
State-enforced homos.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, she has a machine gun. That's a little bit overkill to...
Yeah, for someone boarding a
transport.
flight.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's not dangerous. Yeah, he's just boarding a flight, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, well, the attitude between nationalist dissident groups, specifically the group headed up by Thomas Sewell and the police, is pretty hostile at the moment. But these guys operate within the law, as far as I'm aware. Like, I'm pretty close friends with some of the guys in Tom's group, and I sometimes do a bit of training with them once every week or two. And like, these guys obey the law. They do their utmost to make sure their activity, their activism, their protest activity is legal. But they're still treated with pretty.
They're treated like worse than criminals. Like the cops don't treat like pedophiles and rapists and murderers this bad. Like because you
Right, and I do think that in time it will ease up, so long as these guys continue to protest. They'll actually become a normal aspect of protest culture, specifically in Melbourne, but hopefully all across Australia. This is the advice that I gave to some of these guys recently. I said, you're kind of like the new guys on the block. Like one of the reasons the Palestinian protesters, for example, the police facilitate their events, they get handled with kid gloves, they get away with a lot. It's because they've been there a long time, they've been protesting a long time, and they've sued police on multiple occasions for using excessive force against them, or even just for putting their hands on them and that sort of stuff. And they've been successful in a lot of those legal action or class actions against Victoria Police. So I think in time, with enough consistent protesting and with a couple of legal matters against the police for excessive force, I think these guys could find themselves in a similar position as the Palestinian protesters. The police might be a little bit too afraid to, not really sure what to do. You know what I mean? That's what they're like with the Palestinian protesters. And as annoying as the Palestinian protesters are, they kind of have set a precedent for protesting, and I think it's wise to kind of learn from what they've done. And it's consistency and actually pushing back against the police legally that has acquired for the Palestinian protesters that long-standing position in Australian protest culture. And I believe that's what these guys, Tom and the guys, are going for with their protests as well.
Well, it definitely looks like this is what they're doing, because this protest, counter-protesting, I don't know what it is, open borders, like Pajit saying we should open the borders. You had, the Australia-European movement and, the National Socialist movement do their counter-protest. This is only a week after the big protest in Sydney. So it looks like they are doing these regular protests. And, just from here, I don't know if it's a difference between the Queensland police and the Melbourne police. At least here, like, the police are just, like, blatantly assaulting them. So it does look like there's a difference there.
Already in this footage, you can see that the police are making some effort to actually facilitate their protest.
Yeah.
Rather than move them on and, use violence to prevent the protests from happening, which is already an improvement in circumstance for them. But regarding those pro-refugee protesters or open borders protesters, I mean, come on, is this still happening? I mean, hasn't it
just look at them? Look at them. It's all just Pajeets and like communists.
Yeah, but don't they realize that this mass immigration just profits the elite? It's just
they do. They just don't care.
It's driving down wages. It's driving up property prices. It's just making the rich richer. I mean, you couldn't be more of a useful idiot than to join in with these open border protesters. Like, that's stupidity.
I think what this kind of shows, it's good that you brought that up, you guys, because what this really shows is that even though we're all living in reality, right, you can still be like totally detached from reality at the same time, like these people are. Like you brought all those, both of you brought all those good points up, but these people just have no idea. And it's important that we as nationalists understand that, because like me personally, I felt like I operated on the basis of like everybody kind of was almost there with like was kind of noticing the same things, but never underestimate how out of the know instead of in the know people are. Like never underestimate that how
don't underestimate the power of propaganda, I suppose.
Yeah,
propaganda, effective messaging, it can make people believe literally anything.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So you need to start. You kind of really need to take people by the hand and guide them through what is going on. Because I personally just assumed that they kind of were already coming around, but actually, as evidenced by this, you can see people are, useful plebs for the regime.
To be fair, though, there isn't nearly as much of a presence of anti-fascist activism in Melbourne, at least, than there was probably about 8 years ago. Like the hard left protesters have really dropped off, and I think it's a combination of realizing that mass immigration actually just profits the rich more, and also the anti-lockdown protesters, the COVID lockdown nonsense, all that stuff. I
Mm.
think that kind of turned a lot of them as well.
It sort of did. I actually know some left wing people that were actually quite like their organizations they were in, because they would tell me that they used to be in these these commie anarchist organizations, and it actually quite divided a lot of them. The whole lockdowns and mandates, like the right was pretty united, saying this is all bullshit. But the left was actually internally, they didn't really show it, but there was a lot of strife within these organizations that they haven't really recovered from.
What's the presence or the left wing activity like in New Zealand? Do you
Not
guys
that
deal with
high.
a lot of that?
There was
No.
an Antifa protest in Wellington, which is the capital, right? This is where they all congregate, just like Melbourne. And there was only about 150 of them there. There was some protest against some like abortion. A bunch of churches did like a abortion, like anti-abortion rally, so you had these Antifa turn up. But there was less than 200, which is not really that much.
Yeah, right. What I suppose it's more of an institutional problem
Yeah,
in New Zealand
absolutely.
as it is here still. Yeah, well, it's very much still the same here. It's like there's not even really a use for anti-fascist activism when you consider that the state police in every state of
Yeah, true.
Australia are essentially filling the role of anti-fascism. They're the ones breaking up right-wing protests. They're the ones targeting nationalist activists with harassment, oppression, and even legal action in some cases. It's like, what use is there for anti-fascism really, other than to provide the police with further info and data on who the dissidents are? It's like that's all they're really doing these days. They're just kind of blogging and
Yeah, that's all they
making
do
it
here.
easier.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're
yeah.
just making it easier for the state
They
to
just do it for
harass
free.
dissidents.
They do it for
Yeah.
free. They're a bunch of they're a bunch of hall monitors that dob you into the police for saying the N word or something. It's sort of ridiculous. All right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's much the same here. It looks like the culture is similar over in New Zealand to what it is here. It is mostly an institutional issue with what we call leftism, which is really just anti-national influence. It's people who have been co-opted into believing that white people are some sort of historical devil,
Yeah.
and they need to pay for all these past atrocities, and the only way they can effectively pay for it is to accept unlimited mass migration, which actually just profits all the rich capitalists, many of whom are uh, cosmopolitan Jewish characters. So it's like it's a similar situation, I
Yeah.
suppose.
I mean,
It's only
a lot of these like leftists and stuff, they know that they're not gonna. Well, I mean, maybe if they own property, uh, the boomers know that the house price is going to keep going up, so they sort of support it then. But a lot of young people, they know that like mass migration suppresses wages, it increases costs of living. But they're like, because they have such a rhetoric of anti-white propaganda like pushed into their head, it's like that doesn't matter. That's all secondary. Their main concern is just making sure there's no white countries left and making some sort of communist utopia with open borders, because that's sort of what they want at the end. Is they don't want white countries to exist, so it doesn't matter to them that our standard of living is plummeting, because that's all secondary to just being an anti-white parasite.
and the main perpetrators are actually white themselves, which is ironic. It's sad as well.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, that's the thing. I think you've mentioned this with Joel in the past. Like a lot of these foreigners, like Pajeets and Chinamen and whatever, they know that they're not part of our nation. They know they aren't our people. But it's leftists and liberals that pretend that they are.
Yeah, like most of the immigrants are just taking advantage of the stupidity of certain individuals within our institutions, policymakers, lawmakers. The immigrants are just taking advantage, and they're not the real issue. The real issue are the traders in the institutions making it possible for foreign nations to take advantage of ours.
Yeah, Gil sent me some footage of some of your previous activism. So this was part of, was this a True Blue crew, or was this a different organization?
This was United Patriots Front, and this was actually a little flash rally back in 2016, I believe. Maybe it was 2015, but we made it. Look, Daniel Andrews had made a statement at the time. He was the Premier of Victoria at the time.
Yeah.
And he suggested that you know violent activism had no place in Australia, and he kind of like deliberately named us and
Right.
refused to acknowledge that Antifa or leftist activists even existed. So I said, okay, well, let's bring Antifa to the doorstep of Daniel Andrews' office. And so I said, we're going to host a flash rally, we're going to pretend to host a protest against Daniel Andrews' statements, and we're going to, draw Antifa out right out the front of his office. And basically what I'm saying there on the megaphone is that the Premier is refusing to acknowledge that the real extremists, the real people who are sort of like fanatical, violent activists, are these characters over here. And so after that, he actually changed his tune and said, oh, it looks like there's violence on both sides.
That's
So
sort of surprising they acknowledged that, actually. I would have thought he would have just kept his mouth shut.
Yeah, well, these days that he would have, but this was a while ago now. Like, this is when the culture was quite different. It's when sort of the left wing versus right wing rallies were quite new. I mean, there's a young Thomas Sewell standing behind me there with the glasses on.
Yeah,
Wow,
I didn't even notice that. That's pretty
That's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
we've been shoulder to shoulder for a long time, man. Like we met at the first rally I ever attended, which was a Reclaim Australia rally in 2015. And there's Chris Shortis, one of my other close colleagues behind me there. But yeah, this is old stuff now. This was basically how we got started. This is how Tom got started. This is how I got started in political activism. So this is like ancient stuff.
Yeah, well, it's great that you're still doing it to this day, and you're veterans of the movement, because in New Zealand as well. I mean, we all have to start somewhere. It's just over time, as you get involved with these years and years, you obviously learn a lot. So it's good to be able to learn from these things, and having veteran people like yourself and Tom involved.
Basically, you just need to keep at it. Like if you really want to put yourself on the map and move nationalism forward in major political discourse, you just have to sort of keep appearing. You keep appearing online, you keep appearing in public. And those little one-liners, those little clips of you really hammering home a specific talking point that really can't be refuted, it's stuff like that that sort of just has that staying power. And then people always end up looking for you to find out what you're saying or thinking about a certain circumstance or topic. And it just kind of, it's all downhill from there. You just got to keep at it.
Well, speaking of the narrative and discourse, have you noticed, I've noticed in New Zealand that like leftists and liberals, going back to migration, they don't even try to like justify it anymore. Like they don't even go, oh, we need we need these people to keep our economy going. We need these people to look after us when we're old for some reason. It's like they don't even try anymore. They just go, oh, we need immigrants because you're white. And that's like it. Like there's just no the arguments aren't even there anymore.
Hate is a really strong motivator, and they are fundamentally just motivated by a hatred of white people, and any wording or phraseology they can employ and use to justify their ends, which is just doing damage to white nations. I mean, unfortunately, it does come down to that. There's no arguing with these people. And this is what I've tried to explain to my colleagues over the years. You can't actually argue with a leftist because they just hate you and want to kill you. That's what their ideology comes down to. They won't even admit it to themselves sometimes, but fundamentally, at the core of their philosophy is just an anti-white hatred. It's an anti-white racism that's fueling them, and they won't be satisfied until white nations are completely destroyed. And that is what's moving them at the end of the day. You can't reason with people like that.
Yeah, I agree. And luckily, because we've got like truth and reality on our side, and we have like these objective measures that we can point to, like plummeting standards of living. Like we keep getting proven right. I was talking to Mark Collette about the same thing. Like, when was the last time like people of our mindset were ever wrong? Like, I don't think it's ever happened. Like, it just doesn't happen.
They wouldn't need to have censored us so hard if we were wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
The censorship.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I. Well, that brings me into that. So you've experienced lots of censorship yourself. You've had YouTube channels banned. You just even like a non-political travel channel, as is mentioned on the noticer here. Great website. So yeah, could you tell us about your experience over the years with censorship, and the censorship of all these organizations that you've been involved with as well in Australia on social media and, even the mainstream media, because you're involved with Sky News for a couple of years ago, well, maybe a decade ago at this point.
Yeah, well, censorship was something that hit me hard and suddenly, beginning in around 2016 when Facebook closed down my, or was it 2017? Sorry. No, I think I was pretty free until 2017. In a couple of interviews with journalists, I just openly admitted that Facebook was like a digital magazine that everyone had attached to their hands. And the more commonly you could appear in that magazine, the more effectively you could, sway public opinion. And it was a free magazine to publish to. Like you didn't have to pay any sort of fee or tax in order to publish to it. So I said, why wouldn't I take advantage of that? I was actually surprised. I said to this particular journalist that I was permitted to publish in the digital magazine that was Facebook back in those days. And shortly after I kind of admitted that in an interview, I opened my phone one day and found that I was deleted from Facebook entirely, and no reason was given. I wasn't given the ability to or the option to appeal.
Well, even if you did appeal, they wouldn't have given it back to you.
Censorship became very vicious. Like everything was shut down. I was banned from Twitter, and they never gave me an exact reason about why they banned me. And I think, in a way, though, it's kind of good. My voice was more of a moderate voice. Like I said, I was only taking more explicit nationalistic talking points and filtering them down so that they were palpable and so the ordinary mind was more receptive to them.
Yep.
And but I was censored just for doing that, and as a result, all these more radical and explicit talking points ended up just coming up to the surface. So by censoring more moderate or sort of like normie friendly voices like mine in the past, all this censorship has actually led to is more explicit, extreme, straight to the point phraseology, and that's come to the forefront now, as we can see on X, formerly Twitter. So it hasn't actually worked to the advantage of the current establishment at all. It's only actually made more explicit talking points more popular. So there wasn't really, if they didn't censor the more moderate normie friendly voices, then maybe they could have kept things at a more moderate normie friendly tier. But look, I won't ramble on for too long. I'm still experiencing censorship now, and the latest. Well, I haven't been posting to Telegram very often because there's been a lot of app bans on Telegram lately. Apple and Google have been censoring Telegram channels, and whenever that happens, I tend to just like go quiet on the posting for a little while in the hope that I don't get banned as well. So far, it seems to be working. I don't really write anything overly explicit on Telegram, but it doesn't really matter. I've been censored just for being a normie friendly voice in the past, as I explained. But this recent censorship I was hit with on YouTube was interesting because my whole YouTube channel was deleted just for posting a travel vlog. But in the travel vlog, I catch up with some of Tom Sewell's members from Queensland and we go to the gym together. And in the description for the video, I just put the email link. If anyone's interested in getting in contact with these guys, this is who they are, that kind of thing. And within a couple of weeks, that whole channel got deleted. It wasn't just the video, it was the whole channel. And initially, I was told that the channel was deleted for repeated and severe violations of YouTube's guidelines. when I asked for an example of that, because I hadn't had a single strike or warning, when I asked for an example of that, they changed their story and actually said, "Oh, actually, you're actually being deleted for circumvention." And I said, "What do you mean circumvention? I've never been deleted before. I've lost access to an account once before, but I've never been deleted before." And they didn't answer me.
Yeah.
So obviously, I was targeted for posting that vlog video. And I think the reason I was targeted was because it normalizes me and the guys who are involved in active clubs. It basically presents right-wing nationalist guys as healthy, sensible, normal people, relatable people, working class people with a very straightforward, sensible perspective of the world. And they don't want people to see that. They want the right-wing, especially members of active clubs. They want these guys to be seen as a potential security threat, a dark shadow militia, something that is, it's justifiable to go and arrest them and hit them with all these terror charges or something. And anyone who's trying to normalize those guys, like I was doing in that video, that needs to be shut down quickly because it flies in the face of the message that the government wants to send out there, which is these guys are a security threat. And that's why I think I was censored from YouTube recently.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just thought it was because, you would have had like ASIO, the Australian Security Service, like literally send them an email or something. But maybe there was a bit more thought to that.
Well, censorship like that tends to come as a directive from some agency, but I can't be sure what agency it is and what motivation they actually have. This is all speculation, so don't take it as gospel. I'm speculating because, like I said, there is that Senate inquiry into far right extremism right now. Active clubs are a big subject matter in that inquiry, and I've just published footage of myself training with an active club as part of a longer travel vlog experience, and that had my whole YouTube account shut down. It was a paid premium account too that was like 4 or 5 years old. So how can it be circumvention if they've been taking my money for that long? Like, they knew it was me. Apparently there was just a problem of me getting together with some boys in an active club. That was really what flagged me for deletion. But
Well,
yeah,
I mean, it's a problem, isn't it? Literally just having a healthy lifestyle, going to the gym, not being a drug addict, not being a homosexual. I mean, it's a threat to the state at this point.
well, I suppose it's a threat to the ongoing effort to subvert Australia, to make everybody weak, dependent, drug addicted, and obsessed with their sexual orientation. People like that, it's a simple divide and conquer method. They're going to be much more distracted by petty feuds between each other, their drug prescriptions, and whether or not they're gay, trans, intersex, or whatever the hell they're coming up with inside their heads. It's the perfect divide and conquer method, which is why I'm really surprised that some of our more educated, energetic academic brains actually fall for it and propagate it. It's like, isn't it obvious that these methods are just being used as a form of psychological warfare? How the fuck are you falling for it? You're supposed to be the educated class, but they're the worst offenders. They're the people who are all like, oh, I'm gender neutral. Here's my pronouns. It's like, man, you have just been completely co-opted, hook, line, and sinker by a psych war effort, and you don't even realize it. It's amazing.
Yeah, on that, that's really interesting. How much? Because of course we know, a lot of Western governments, not just Australia and New Zealand, are subverted. Do you have any idea to what extent, or what's your read on how subvertive the Australian government is? Because they really do try, and in the media apparatus, of course, they really do try and do a number on everybody, which quite frankly, they're all 100 IQ roundabout, they don't have time to, that they're busy with work and their family. What, so can you give us a sense of that? Or, because Albo Albanese, or whatever his name is like a literal outright communist.
The institutional bureaucrats on a government level, it seems like there's this like nepotistic effort to only employ people or only promote people to government positions who are friendly to, subversive or major left-wing philosophy and talking points. It's like, if you can, accept a trip over to, I don't know, some communist country, and you go through the motions,
That's
or
right.
the box ticking process of, okay, yes, I'm a feminist. Yes, I agree with all of these, gender dysphoria ideas, and yes, I'm for racial equality, and I'm going to support mass immigration. Well, it's like there's a box ticking process that you have to go through in order to actually get into a government position with an existing major party, or in a major position where you can affect law and policy. But on a societal level, the average working class person isn't really affected by the subversion at all. They're just really exhausted by it. Like, if you talk to a guy on a construction site, he's not a feminist, he's not gender neutral, and he wants nothing to do with that shit. And he's actually really angry and sick of hearing about it. Like, so like, there's this minority, this really amplified minority of subversives, like, ruling over Australia from this, this tier of political bureaucracy, and the masses of Australians just hate them. Like, the people hate the government down here. They don't want anything to do with it, but the government's like consistently trying to encroach upon them with more laws and more censorship and more surveillance, and the average person just feels exhausted by it, and that's how it feels, honestly.
Yeah, well, I mean, just objectively looking at it, yeah, Labor's dead. Like, in Australia, the Labor Party's like unpopular as they've been, like probably a low, like a decades-long low since they've got to government. But it's unfortunate because there's no real right-wing alternative in Australia like there is in other countries. You've got like One Nation, but they're pretty bad. Like at least in New Zealand, we got New Zealand first. They're not perfect, but they're better than anything Australia has. It sort of
No, there's
sucks.
definitely a market. There's definitely a market right now for someone to just stand up and say, you know what, we're racist and we want mass deportation. Vote for us.
Yeah, well,
Like if someone does that in major politics, they're going to cop a lot of flack from the institutions. They're going to have to fight legal battles. They're going to have to make sure their taxes are squeaky clean. They're going to have a hard time staying out of jail as a political prisoner. But if they can manage all that, there's a huge market for someone like that right now. Like they would get votes. People would vote for them straight up.
yeah. Well, I mean, you have it happening in Europe. You've got the Freedom Party in Austria, pretty much just saying like we believe in remigration and sending all these like Arabs and Africans back to their shitholes. And it's the same thing in like Sweden. There's parties like that, and they do get elected. They do get elected into parliament, and in places like Denmark, they're already sending back Syrian refugees because they're, a drain on society. So it's sort of good to see it going in that direction.
Don't forget Afghanistan and Pakistan. How the Pakistanis said, "Oh, you need to get down, go back to Afghanistan, you bloody bastards." And, and they did it, and they're like a third world, mess, and they sent them packing, and they're going, and there have been countless other countries who've done the same thing, and it works. It's not a far-fetched idea at all. Certainly, Australia can do that.
Are you guys situated in the northern part of New Zealand?
We're in different places. I'm southern. He's I don't know. I don't even know I should say this.
That's all right.
Yeah,
Look,
it's a small world, Blair.
It's a pretty big island, so I don't think you're giving away too much if
Yeah.
you say north. I'm just curious about what the immigration's like over there. Like,
Really
have things
bad.
changed noticeably? It's bad, is it?
Yeah, in places like Auckland, Wellington, it's same as Melbourne. Like the place is just being flooded with Indians, Chinamen, Pakistanis, Samoans, all sorts. Like just these like riffraff of the world are being imported here. It's non-stop. I mean,
Has it had a similar effects to the cost of living? Like,
oh, absolutely.
Rental prices over here have skyrocketed, and like the standard like family, like if you're a New Zealander family, an Australian family, you're about to have your first kid, and even if you've got a dual income, you actually can't afford to buy a house in Australia now. Like my sister and her partner, they're about to have their second kid. They bought a house, got a mortgage about 5 years ago, and due to interest rate hikes as a result of this, like, artificially manipulated cost of living, and it's just, I don't know what's going on with the money exactly, but all I know is they can't afford, they've got a dual income and they still can't afford to cover the interest on their mortgage. So they've had to move in with my parents in a different state and rent the house out to some people who are now paying their tenants paying the monthly rent, which makes it possible for my sister and her partner to actually keep paying off their mortgage, but they can't actually afford to live in the house they bought.
It's ridiculous.
And that's just like a standard family situation. And if that's happening to them, it's happening to everybody else too. So it's no wonder why people are so angry and ready for a racist candidate,
Well, I mean, we're reporting people like this, people that just like lie on their he just lied about being a doctor, and for some reason our retarded health system gave this guy a job. You're giving like Pajeets that wrote down their qualification on the back of a napkin positions in the health system.
It's probably because they have a diversity quota. They're probably trying to find a certain amount. Like I was injured about a year ago. I ruptured my pectoral tendon again at the weightlifting competition that I just injured myself at again this year. Not as bad this year, but long story short, I went to the emergency room. I waited for like 6 hours, and I eventually saw a GP who was an Indian woman who told me it just looks like a strain and that I should go home and rest.
Oh my god!
Dude, never.
As soon as he said Indian woman, I went, uh-oh.
Yeah. And not only that, right? Not only that, she left me in her room, which was full of drugs. Like there was a huge drug cabinet with all these like vials and syringes in it and stuff. And I could see insulin, I could see morphine, and she just left me in there for like 20 minutes. And I ended up letting myself out because I'm thinking, is she coming back? And I went around to the main desk and I said, I was just left by one of the GPs in the room, and I'm wondering if she's coming back. And the woman at the desk was like, oh yeah, she just came up to the desk looking for you. And I'm like, what?
Is she like dying of dementia? What the heck's going on there? How do you forget that you leave someone in your room?
I could have ransacked that place and walked out of there with like thousands of dollars in street value worth of morphine. And like it was just so unprofessional. I went home. woke up in the morning, realized this is bad pain. This is not just a strain. Went to a white doctor in my area, and he sent me off for immediate scans and an MRI. He said it looks like a tendon rupture,
Oh,
and
yeah.
the scans confirmed it was a tendon rupture, and I was getting surgery from, some white surgeons like 2 days later. So
Can I just say this to our audience? As a general rule, if you get given a doctor that's like a Pajit or an African or whatever, just like ask for a new doctor. Like, what are they going to do? Like, I guess be like, no, I don't like this doctor. Give me a white one. I've done it before. I suggest that other people do it. Like, there's not much they can do.
and it's not even necessarily like having a dig at Indian people. It's like it's even just a language barrier sometimes. Like I've been to a hospital and I've tried to hand over a referral to an Indian woman at the receptionist desk, and I couldn't understand what she was saying. So I just took the referral to a white nurse who was walking past, and immediately I was able to communicate faster and more efficiently. So it's like it's just not useful. It doesn't make any practical sense to have Indian people who can't even speak the language properly working in Australian healthcare. Like, what kind of fucking sense does it make, especially in a service that needs to move pretty quickly and efficiently in order to provide people with a high level of service? It's just very frustrating that we have to put up with this, and it all comes down to racial equality, doesn't it? We have to treat these people as though they're just like us, but they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder how bad it has to get with the immigration before they're covering people in like cow dung. Like, how they do that in India. I don't know if you guys have seen
Yeah.
that, but anyway.
Hopefully not that bad. Well, we're going to have mass deportations soon anyway, so we don't have to worry that much about it. But anyways, so yeah, I mean, I guess we'll go back to the topic of, I guess you'd call it political suppression in Australia. Like, yeah, we sort of mentioned it before. I think we mostly talked about this before the stream started, but you have dozens and dozens of cops coming to a private weightlifting competition because they like lifting weights while being white. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not allowed to lift weights while you're white.
Yeah, there's currently there's a lack of understanding between nationalist groups and police at the moment. I I'd love to be a fly on the wall while the police are being briefed about these events, because whatever they're told makes them approach these events with a lot of hostility, very aggressively, unnecessarily aggressively. And as a result, the guys at the events, the nationalist guys, the right wing guys, they respond with a sort of relative amount of aggression. And it makes the potential for violent confrontation unnecessarily high. Basically, I think the police need to understand that these guys are doing their utmost to abide by the law, and they're just trying to build a community network. They're not doing anything that's against the law specifically. And the police need to approach these guys with a little bit more tact. If they do, the guys will respond with more tact. And I'd like to see that happen in the future, but whether or not it will is anyone's guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the cops, they're doing that on purpose. Like, if they're not just like, I don't know if they're being told these people, like have weapons or are terrorists or something, but they're trying to provoke the nationalists on purpose to try and get them arrested and try to cause a scuffle. Like,
I think
that's the number one goal.
it could be it. And if that is the case, the guys are doing extremely well, not responding violently. But I was at this particular event. If this was the one in the Gold Coast, yeah, it was. And this was the one I just injured my quad at. And I don't really like to talk to police. I don't really feel like anything can come of it. But I was forced to interact with an inspector on this particular day. And the only reason the only legal reason they had for coming to this particular event, which was just a weightlifting event hosted by Thomas Sewell and some other guys connected to him, state leaders and so forth of his community group. Their reason for coming was to serve everybody in the building with an order, and the order consisted of a direction that no one in this building was allowed to wear dark face coverings while in Queensland, but COVID masks were okay. So as long as the face covering was light in color, it was okay, but no dark face coverings were allowed.
What?
I sort of attempted to challenge the inspector on that legally, because I argued that the only reason they were actually trying to serve these orders was to identify everyone in the building. Because in order for the order to be served on you, they need to know your name, address, date of birth, right? So then they can say they served the order on that individual. And I tried to create an understanding with the inspector that, okay, they'd already come to the agreement that women and children could leave the event without being ID'd. And I also said, look, not everyone at the event is actually a direct community member. Like, I'm just an associate. These are just my friends. So I don't see why I need to give my personal identification to the Queensland Police and be served this order, which doesn't even make any sense to me anyway. I'm not planning on wearing any face coverings. But they weren't really as amicable with me as I was trying to be with them at the end of the day, and they still demanded that everyone needed to be identified. And that was about as far as it went. But there was a march the following morning after this, and there was some pretty interesting footage, pretty distressing footage actually, where a couple of the guys, specifically Joel Davis and Thomas Sewell, were just outrightly bullied by some members of the Queensland Police there. And the police officer actually admits it in the footage that he's pushing them around, and he steals Tom's phone and demands that Tom says please twice in order to get it back, just because he personally finds their views offensive, which, obviously flies in the face of democratic values of being able to believe whatever you want. Obviously, the police aren't really willing to stand by that in Queensland. But look, there's been a lot of police misconduct claims in Queensland over the past couple of years. And we had a very prominent incident occur about 12 to 18 months ago. I'm sure you guys heard about it, where a family of former teachers opened fire on police at their property, which was in rural Queensland. This was, it's been, referred to as the Train family incident because the surname of the family was Train, I believe. And during the COVID lockdowns, well, before all the lockdowns happened, these guys, members of the family, were just school teachers. I think they'd been school teachers for most of their lives. But then because they wouldn't get vaccinated or wouldn't get enough vaccinations, they kind of argued their rights to not be vaccinated. They lost their jobs and were confined to their property in rural Queensland, where they started getting visits from the police for some reason. And about 12 months later, they opened fire on police who claimed they were just performing a welfare check at their home. But then later, police changed their story and said it wasn't a welfare check. They were actually there to serve a warrant. So there's a 12-month gap there where the relationship between the Train family and the Queensland Police is really hazy. We're not sure how many times police visited them, but what we can be sure of is the Train family felt that they were being harassed and they thought the police were coming there to kill them. They thought they were defending themselves against police officers that were coming over there to shoot them. And they made that clear in a video they posted right before they ended up being killed by a response team. The police went out there and shot them in response to the Train family having shot some of their officers.
Well,
So
should
there's
be a. Oh, sorry, keep going.
yeah, that's basically the whole story. But the point is, there's a lot of shady accusations and a lot of hazy, difficult to understand circumstances within Queensland Police Command. So it's difficult to understand exactly what's going on there. But I'll just leave it at that, I suppose.
Yeah, well, apparently, like after the shootings happened, police basically started stealing things from their property, like from their estate. It's nuts. It's very strange stuff.
That reminds me, I think the neighbor who apparently wandered over to see what was happening was also shot, possibly by police, and his house, as well as the Train family's house, strangely caught fire almost immediately after the shootout. And there may have been property acquisition by the government afterwards. The government may have wanted the Train family's property in order to run a pipeline through that area. I'm not sure what kind of pipeline or resource they were trying to run through there, but that verges on conspiracy theory now because it was just stuff that I heard along the grapevine. But look, long story short, there's been a lot of misconduct allegations against Queensland Police. There's clearly some Queensland Police officers who are acting whimsically and not following procedure when they're dealing with protesters, as we saw last weekend with the march by Thomas Sewell and his guys through Queensland CBD, which was totally legal, but some of the police acted unlawfully in the way they approached these guys. And there's actually going to be some legal efforts, I know of that, on the part of Tom Sewell to hopefully bring some people to justice who acted unlawfully. Yeah.
Well, hopefully that does happen. It'll be good if some of these police officers lose their jobs, lose their mortgages, become destitute. That's the best we can hope for basically all Zogbots. But hopefully that goes well. But unfortunately, you're trying to do this within the system that our enemies control, basically. So well, I don't know if anything's going to come of it, but hopefully it does. I mean, you might as well do it. You might as well, waste the state's resources even more. I mean, hopefully it's not a waste. You might as well make them use it up.
Yeah, but like I said, I think ultimately, because there's probably going to be cops that are tuning into this, right?
Oh yeah, no doubt.
And I think there's ultimately a lack of understanding between these nationalist activists and police. And like I said, if police just approach these guys with more tact, they'll be treated with more tact, I think. I hope anyway. Because there's no reason for there to be excessive hostilities between legitimate legal protesters of a certain type and state police. That's not constructive on a long-term basis. So I'd like to see things settle down between police and right-wing protesters, but we'll see if that actually happens. Time will tell.
I'm really I really want to ask Blair. You said you listened to Yuri Bezmenov over and over again when you were playing video games. Could you tell us a bit about that? I'm really interested in that.
Sure. Well, before I was into politics, I was already kind of getting into politics, but I spent sort of years just reading and listening to podcasts to better formulate my own perspective and philosophy of what was happening. I've never really been that much of an ideologue, so much as I've just kind of wanted to uh, create a practical result for what I believe to be the truth. And see, I'm understood as a nationalist, and I suppose I hold myself that way. But I just see nationalism as the truth. And what's going on in the world today, I see as a deliberate repression of nationalism, therefore a repression of the truth and just the reality of the natural world we live in. And that reality is that, you know, it's perfectly normal and reasonable to want to live in a community with your own kin and to want to protect your own kin and establish real boundaries to do so. Now, Yuri Bezmenov really opened my eyes as to a different type of warfare, or just to the fact that warfare doesn't always have to be violent. Actually, through listening to Bezmenov when I was in my early 20s, I began to understand that we're always in a cycle of warfare. It's just not always violent. And when pairing Bezmenov's perspective with some of the quotes I read by Napoleon Bonaparte, I began to understand that the world is always at war. And anyone who's kind of or believing that we're not at war is generally at a disadvantage. They're the people who are suffering the disadvantage. Everyone who understands that we are constantly at war is doing everything they can to gain an advantage over the enemy. And I suppose I really wanted the message of Bezmenov to sink in when I was young, because I found him not only to be an informative speaker, but also quite charismatic and easy to understand. So when I was 21, 22 years old, I would just play World of Warcraft, and I would turn the volume off and just listen to, because Yuri Bezmenov has 2 lectures that were available on
That's
YouTube at the
awesome.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be in Battlegrounds and Arena, man, in my Arena teams, and I'd just be listening to Bezmenov the whole time. So I was just being steadily brainwashed, but in a good way, in a good way.
yeah.
And I came out of doing that for 12, 24 months. I came out of that just with this really clear understanding that everything you see has some sort of psychological impact on you, whether you realize it or not. Whether it's a movie, a television program, a song you're listening to in the car, there is a message in that song. And I'm not talking about subliminal messages. It's not that sophisticated. It's actually just right in your face all the time. It could be the lyrics. If you're listening to a song on the radio, for example, I won't harp on about this for too long. I'll just give one example. Well, you'll notice that on the radio, most mainstream songs are repeated over and over again. You'll only hear a combination of about 25 different songs every day at the very most. It's always the same songs over and over again. And any female artist will be singing about how strong and independent and empowered she is and how she doesn't need men. And then every male artist who's singing on his own will be singing about how vulnerable and heartbroken by some woman he is, right? So I came to realize that there was an effort there to I suppose you could say, generate more of a feminist culture where women were pushed more into the realm of careerism and men were, encouraged to be weak and vulnerable. so that women could get ahead of them in various industries. And even though it might not seem like much, it might just seem like songs on the radio, it's still contributing in some small way to chipping away at the psychology of the people listening to it. Right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was on that note. Yeah, I was just listening to some I was with my boomer parents, so they were watching like music videos and stuff, and I was just going through because I usually don't listen to mainstream music, right? Just going, wow, it's amazing how much of this music is all just subversive. Like it was
not just music, not just music, but film. Like, there's a
yeah,
reason why the Obamas invested so heavily into Netflix. I mean, and everyone knows it. The thing is, the subversion has become in the West so obvious that people started coming up with a name for it. They started calling it political correctness
yeah,
because casting, themes, plots, and characters in movies and television programs were so obviously set up in a way to promote multiculturalism and a certain style of speech that people were like, "Oh, this is politically correct." So, I think one of the major mistakes that's been made by the administrators, the people who are administering the process of overseeing the casting and the story and the plot lines of these programs, TV shows, they've treated people as stupider than they really are. They've expected people not to notice something that's actually really obvious
yeah,
when they're putting the white guy with the black girl, or they're making a cast that's like one Asian, one Indian, one black person, and one white person. It's gotten to the point where it's just a complete eye roll, and average people look at it now and they're just like, oh well, this is politically correct. What people are saying when they say this is politically correct is this is subversive,
yeah.
this is psychological warfare. They're actually acknowledging that this program is making an effort to affect their subconscious, and they're aware of it. So it's become way too obvious, and that's actually worked out to our advantage, I think.
Well, speaking of subversion, you've literally got the ABC saying that apparently you subverted the entire Australian voter base when it came to the Voice Aborigine referendum in Australia. Like it was it's sort of nuts. You got literal ABC naming you and Joel Davis and all these people saying you subverted the entire country, which is just insane.
What, in regards to the Aboriginal? What was this in regards to?
The Voice referendum last year.
Yeah, I was barely involved in that. Like, I was just reposting some stuff on Telegram, but because that stuff was getting a lot of views, I don't know. Like, the thing is, I think a lot of the people that get behind some of these stupid referendums, they can't acknowledge that the Australian people are actually more racist than they realize, and so they like to blame. When they lose the referendum, or when they don't get the result they want with a certain government directive or something, when the people actually get a choice, and these bureaucrats, these leftists, they don't get the result they want, rather than acknowledge that people are naturally racist and they're actually on the wrong side of history, they look for someone like me to blame. Like, oh, Blair Cottrell and his Telegram reposts. That's
Yeah,
why the voice
subverted the
failed.
entire country. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's actually sort of good. It was a bit of a white pill, I guess you'd say, because coincidentally, this referendum happened the same day as our general election, so we covered it live, and it was great to see such a massive like trouncing of this establishment garbage from like every state. Every state voted against it. It was great to see. It was great to see just like white people saying no to like browns asking for money all the time, just like begging and like wanting more and more stuff from us. It was just good that people told them it's like, no, we're not going to give you this. And hopefully it continues like that.
Yeah, I remember the energy was really high that day when the results came in. I was actually up in Queensland just on a bit of a holiday, I remember, and yeah, everyone was super excited about that. And it was one of those it was one of those moments that reminded you that the average Australian voter isn't completely lost and isn't completely stupid. Like, they still have that instinct for collective self preservation. They don't want to be giving money to Aboriginal people just because they're Aboriginal. And no amounts of hostile anti national propaganda is going to make them want to.
Yeah, not like doing what welcome to countries on the AFL. Like, luckily, wasn't able to subvert the Australian voter, which is good.
Yeah, well, it's actually like it's exhausted the Australian voter. It's angered the Australian voter
Being
because,
welcome
like,
to your own country. It's ridiculous.
it is, and we don't even see Aboriginal people. Like, the Aboriginal population is so small, and it's mostly clustered up in the north, especially in Darwin. Down here in Melbourne, like, I barely see anyone who's even partially Aboriginal. They just don't exist. But there's all these government initiatives, and I don't even know, every government building has an Aboriginal flag flying from it, and it just seems like a constant virtue signal on the part of the establishment, government employees. Everyone's just trying to signal what a good person they are for caring about Aboriginals, and for the average worker, it's just exhausting, you know.
Yeah, you got the same thing here with Maoris. They're all constantly like asking for more and more money and more money for dem programs from the white
But
man.
it's probably not even the Maoris doing it though. It's probably certain government bureaucrats who just want to tax the people more for some sort
Yeah,
of social political agenda. Like you got to realize some of this stuff, some of these, you know, whether they're pro Maori or pro Aboriginal agendas, they tend to turn the working class against that race of people. Like the white people in New Zealand or the white people in Australia, they might end up being like, "Oh, I'm so sick of these Aboriginals," or "I'm so sick of these bloody Maoris." When in reality, it's not even the Aboriginals or Maoris doing it. It's just a couple of left-wing political bureaucrats trying to find an excuse to create another tax.
yeah. I mean, that's definitely true in Australia, but here there are definitely Maori factions that want to have your money. I don't think it's a majority of Maori, but there are these like Maori iwi elites that just want to get as much like reap as much money off possible off like the white man's tax dollars. That's definitely a thing here.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. Serve them pretty well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're
They've
buying.
got all their land and their marais and iwis and stuff and their fried chicken. You know, it's worked out well for them as a business model. You know,
Yeah, it
to the
has.
point where like they even like even though they have like bleach white skin, they just put like a Maori tattoo on somewhere on their body, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I'm Maori. Give me some fried chicken."
But
the
yeah.
fried chicken thing. Do they get free chicken or something?
Oh
Yeah, they
no,
do.
I mean, just go to your local KFC in South Auckland and you'll understand it.
Yeah. Oh, they
Right.
probably. I wouldn't be surprised if they had some scheme. To be honest, I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what's the in the context of, you know, subversion, what do you what is your take on China? Because there's, of course, we, you know, you guys are against like mass immigration and all that stuff. Is there any sort of effort to because the way I see it, New Zealand's and Australian military is greatly depleted. So, is there, you know, some way to maybe, you know, lobby the Australian government, do you think, to get more
Now
like
called.
submarines or missiles or something like that? Because I kind of feel like we need to concentrate on that as well, because with the internal threat we also have a threat that's external in the form of like China in the South Pacific, right? And it's a bit of a concern. Did you have any thoughts on that, Blair, or any ideas around
The
that?
question's a little bit out of my jurisdiction. It would be a better question to answer to ask Joel Davis. He definitely is more schooled on international politics, military operations, and situations for the nations. I know that Australia is very tied in with the United States militarily, and I think we are. I'm currently reading a book by David Kilcullen about how China has actually learned to fight the West, specifically United States, because direct military combat in whatever scenario is not potentially going to turn out to the advantage of China. And they understand that. And so they're trying to do their best to circumvent direct military combat and fight the West in a different fashion. But yeah, I can't necessarily answer the question in totality. It's just not something that I'm very schooled in.
Okay, no
Oh,
worries.
yeah, that's all good. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, maybe ask Joel. But yeah, they yeah, certainly they're very good at hybrid warfare as well. I mean, these we call them the cookie dough injections, just to say on YouTube. But yeah, that's a way that they've really done a number on the West. And yeah, it's time I think we really got to consider all that, especially with the technocracy. It's a really um, you know, imposed itself quite harshly. And you know, we had Jacinda, who's like a Maoist, and we know we've covered some guy in Australia, I forget his name, who was like a literal communist. I mean, we know how
Oh, yeah. The guy that was he was at a university. He's a former like foreign minister, and he was
yeah,
literally just taking bribes from China. And
yeah, just out in the open. Do you remember who his name
yeah,
is?
I forgot it. But
Forgotten it. Yeah,
it's quite famous in Australia. It's like yeah, it was a minister that was working for a university and just taking money straight from like the Chinese communists.
Doesn't surprise me. There's been some effort by Australian security agencies to publicly sort of signal that they are doing something about foreign interference. They recently arrested a couple dual citizens from Russia, and the
Yeah.
woman was actually employed with the ADF, and apparently she was accessing an ADF website while she was over in Russia for the purposes of like transferring data. And they arrested both of them on conspiracy. I think they charged them with some sort of espionage charge, which had never been used before. But that was a very public signal, and by the intelligence agencies, specifically by AFP and ASIO, that they were actually doing something about foreign interference. Which is, it's, I don't know whether they're doing as much as they're signaling that they're doing, but it still makes you feel like, well, at least something's being done in regards to counter espionage, I suppose. But
yeah. Well, maybe if they like stop sending like 100 cops to people lifting weights, they could do more against the obvious subversion of the country by by hostile foreign factions.
well, there's a big police crisis in Australia right now. Many of the states just aren't recruiting.
Yeah, same here.
People aren't coming forward to be cops, but no one wants to deal
Why
with
would
it.
you?
Yeah, it's so crazy. Like we have, communist CCP shills in Australia and New Zealand government, just obviously shilling and selling out to them, and they push a CCP bioweapon, and yeah, it's like, it's so insane. I feel like people really need to make a bigger deal about that because been a lot of problems surrounding that injection and stuff. But I don't know if you guys want to comment on that, but it's all pretty incredible.
Yeah, well, like we said, like there's I don't know what it's like in Australia, but in New Zealand, there's a faction, I guess you would say, of contrarianism where people go, "Oh, the West is bad, so that must mean China and Russia are good." And that, I don't know, I think that thinking's just like flat out retarded. It's like you can have more than one enemy at once.
It's good to see that Sewell is actually good on that. He actually denounces Eurasianism,
Oh, that's good.
and he's actually been very, and that makes me very optimistic. He seems very clear about that, and that's they seem to know and understand that, and yeah, Australians are very good in that way. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we tend to be pretty local boys down here. Like we try to focus on our island and our region. And I don't feel it's always necessary for me to take a position on international questions. For example, I don't really care about Israel or Palestine.
Yeah, fair
I, just,
enough.
like, I don't want anything to do with either of those states or nation states. And if they destroy each other, great. If one beats the other, great. I don't care. I just don't want to be funding it. I don't want Australian soldiers to be involved in it. And I think that's a pretty typical nationalistic point of view.
Yeah,
We have everything to gain from just not, participating in Israel's wars all across the world that really serve to weaken us and strengthen our enemies.
Yeah.
I mean, China and Russia is just. I mean, well, Russia's army is severely depleted. That they have a huge force to mobilize, even with the huge force they have, which is severely depleted. But yeah, I mean, China, and they're just biding their time and doing drills throughout the South Pacific. So yeah, it's quite a concern. So that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's good at least that Aussies are aware of that.
Yeah, it seems to be more of an American thing. You got these like idiots in America. Well, maybe that's a bit harsh. Maybe they're just ill-informed where they go, "Oh, our enemies, the state, Russia and China are epic." It's like, come on, dude.
It's definitely, yeah, it is kind of an American thing,
You've
unfortunately.
got this weird religious fanaticism in America too, where there's these like I don't know what kind of Christians you would call them, but there's this modern Christian phenomena where and it seems to be really American, where they feel like they have some sort of moral theological obligation to defend Israel.
Oh yeah, Zionist
Israel's
Christians. Yeah.
Evangelical Zionists.
Zionist Christians, man. They're
Yeah.
like they're creepily loyal to Israel, and it's like they're so fanatically you know what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah, possessed
Yeah.
by it. They're like
Yeah.
mind controlled by it.
Even though like there's the logical like the fundamental issue is that like Judaism is a religion that rejects Christ. Like you think that would be a bit of an issue, but apparently not. Like, it's sort of just like, again, it's just retardation. It's like Like
Yeah.
retardation, like medically
it's a faith,
retardation.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a form of faith, and faith, you can't really shake faith with knowledge. So even if you bring all the facts to these people and force them to look at it, it sort of flies in the face of the faith, the Zio-Christian faith that they've adhered to for so long, and so they just will refuse to believe any of the data that you show them.
Yeah.
If you show them in the Talmud where it says that the mother of Christ, Mary, was a whore and that Christ is burning in hot excrement in hell, if you show them the passage and then show them the rabbis that wrote that passage who are Jewish, they'll just refuse to believe it. They'll be like, no, this can't be real. They're our friends. They're our greatest ally. You know?
Our
It's
greatest
ridiculous.
ally that doesn't do anything
Oh.
other than draw them into wars in the Middle East. Amazing.
It is, yeah. It's like even if you get them to read their own Bible, which says, Christ condemned them, called them the synagogue of, Satan and all this, and that,
Yeah, Revelations 3:9, that sort of thing. Like, the synagogue of Satan.
there's just
Yeah.
countless. Yeah. A really good pastor is Pastor Chuck Baldwin, who's a Christian pastor in America, and he just exposes all the nonsense and how, like, with evangelical Zionism and how it's just like a complete cult. Like he's really good. He's like the best at exposing the foolishness of it all. But yeah, it's pretty. I mean, Americans just need to go hard out just exposing that kind of stuff, because it's like, these people are just, severely degenerating America, which is
But
like
there's
our
like a
strongest.
huge shift,
Yeah.
boys. There's a huge shift in the culture, and there's more common sense now than there ever has been before. I mean, you only need to spend 10 minutes on X and you can see that
It's
our
amazing.
talking,
Yeah.
our talking points are extremely popular, and the only thing that's really kept us down is aggressive and consistent censorship. And now that censorship is kind of like not as aggressive, you can see that the common sense standpoints that we've always represented is actually widely shared by so many different people. Like it's so profound, it's so in your face on X that sometimes I don't even feel like I need to be there. I'm like, you know what I mean? I can just not even. Everyone's doing great without me, so I'm just like, oh, I might as well just watch.
It's amazing that platforms that actually have like at least some free speech, like X, like 4chan back in the day. Like they instantly become like conquered territory for like nationalists and like right wingers, because like because literally, as I've said before, our arguments and worldview are based on truth, and you can't debunk the truth. Like you can't debunk what's right in front of your eyes.
You can pathologize it. You can pathologize the truth and make it look like it's a mental deranged illness or something like that needs to be, put in jail. But that's about all they can do. Thanks for having me on, guys. I've got a radiology appointment coming up in the next like half an hour that I'm going to get ready for. So
Okay.
if you guys are happy to, we can kind of start wrapping
Yeah,
it up.
yeah.
Is there anything else we want to touch on?
Yeah,
Make sure she is an Indian, by the way.
Yeah, make sure you get a white doctor. But yeah, just
Oh,
a couple
yeah.
questions from chat. Well, there was a good one before. This is more towards me and Gilbert. We have a guy in chat saying, "Quick rundown on New Zealand first." They're sort of like a right-wing party. They have a anti-immigration rhetoric. They're like economically protectionist. They support they at least in rhetoric they support local industry. And as I know people that are in the party, and a lot of the party membership are actually like really great guys, like on our level. It's a good party, really. It's not too bad. It seems way better than One Nation.
Peter's had a lot to say about China and immigration into New Zealand as well.
Yeah, they're not Zionist shills like Pauline Hanson is, so that's always a big benefit. So
good sign.
Yeah.
Sign. Yeah.
Actually, I think that's sort of the only question. It didn't even really involve Blair. But anyways, thanks for your time, man. It was great talking to you. I really enjoyed this.
No
We'd
worries,
love
guys.
to speak to you again. Yeah,
Thanks for accommodating me, like I said before, and wish you guys all the best. And I'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, cool. We'd love to have you on again. But yeah, have a good appointment. Make sure you get a white doctor. So
I'll do the best I can. Thanks, lad.
All right, cool. Thank you. All right, and thank you to the viewers for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope everyone on the replays enjoyed the show. As always, as I say, stay blessed, not stressed. Any sort of final words, Gil? I mean, Blair left the chat. He's a busy man.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, just some final thoughts. Yeah, that was really cool. That was we'll be looking to do more interviews, I think, with our Australian friends over in Australia. And we've got some really big guests. I imagine we have some Australian viewers watching us right now. I just want to say to both our Australian and NZ and to our international viewers, from Britain or US or France, wherever, we've got a whole bunch of really interesting people coming on, and the really really informative, informed, highly intelligent people. So just stay tuned. It'll be really. I think you'll really enjoy what we have to show in the future. It's all in the works, so stick with us and share the show. Sharing the show would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. The best is yet to come. We actually do have some really good guests. We're going to continue doing I don't know why we did it, but we got our tradition where we got a new guest. Who could it be? There's going to be a lot of those. We've got a lot of those coming out soon. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so fun.
Yeah. It's sort of funny doing that. But anyways, thanks for tuning in. Thanks to Blair, even though he's gone. Hope he has a good appointment at his radiologist. Hope his doctor's white.
But cool guy, right? Awesome.
Yeah, right guy. I was actually
such an awesome dude. Yeah, would love to have him on again.
Yeah, great guy. But thanks for tuning in, and thanks to everyone that's watching the replay. We appreciate you as well. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube and Rumble. Follow us on X and Telegram. And if you want to support the show, we can get donations via Rumble. I mean, we have to pay for our blue check mark somehow. So, but I don't know. That's sort of half joking. I mean, we're good. But like and subscribe, guys. Like and subscribe. Have a good one. We'll see you next week. Oh, wait, no, we won't. Next week I'm on break.
Explain that to them.
Oh, yeah. No, there's a break next week. So there's no show next week, but week after that, we're back. So have a great day. Have a great weekend, guys. And as always, stay blessed, not stressed. Catch you guys next time.
See you, everybody.